here we are. So we're on Siman Yud Gimel, and we are continuing with the laws against idolatry. What constitutes idolatry? What is a person forbidden to do? What is he permitted to do? What are the consequences of his actions? So what we're going to discuss today is Shalola Asais Maisa Eiv. Don't do this thing called Eiv, which we're going to discuss what that means. It's a type of divination. It's a type of sorcery divination. And this is from it corresponds to the Chinuch, Sefer Chinuch, the 255th mitzvah. And the second thing that Rabbi Steif is combining here into the same chapter, Shalol Asois Maisa Yudini. Don't do something called Yudini, and that corresponds to the 256th mitzvah in the Sefer Chinuch. So it says over here, Aleph, Shenemar V'Yikra, says in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 31. Al tifnu el ha'eves ve'el ha'yudinim. Don't turn towards these type of divinations. Ketzad Masa'if. So Rambam writes in the halachas of Avodah Zarah, laws of Avodah Zarah, 6th chapter, 1st halacha. What is Masa'if? Zeh shehu oimid maktir k'teos yidua. Person stands and he burns a known incense. And he holds a collection of hadas. Hadas is the branches of the myrtle branches, and he waves them. And he says certain, in a very slow way, certain incantations that are known only to these people that practice this. Until is heard the person being asked. It sounds as if someone is answering him, is speaking with him, answers him. Sounds like what is answered on the questions that he's asked about in words that sound that they're like sounds like matters under the, or words underneath the earth, in a very, very low voice. It's almost as if it can't even be heard by the ear, but the thoughts can grasp it. And say if a person takes a skull of a dead person and offers incense to it and whispers in it, shuffle ad ma'id mishivri. It sounds like that there's a voice coming out from his armpit, very, very low, and it's answering him. Kol elam ma'asav him ha'isim him ha'isa echad mehen niskal. All these things are called the Maisa Aiv, Aleph Vav Ves, and anyone who does these things is stoned. So that's what Aiv is. Now, it's interesting. You might think these are very primitive things, and they sound very primitive, but it's interesting. When I was in law school, there was a fellow that I was friendly with, and I once visited his apartment, and he told me at some point that the police had raided the apartment underneath his because the people in the apartment below him had been raiding graves to take human skulls to do different type of incantations and different type of rituals with them. So this thing still goes on today. Whether it's exactly this format or a different format, but the concept is the same, trying to do divinations and get answers to questions. Base. Kate said Yamasa Yudani. What's his Yudani? Maniach etzem eif sheshma yudua thief. He places the bone of a bird that the name is called Yudua in his mouth. And he makes incense offerings, and he does different other things until it will fall. I'm not sure what benachba means. And it's going to say in his mouth things that are going to happen in the future. And these are all types of idolatry. And so this warning that what they are, that this warning that we're not allowed to do this. Where do we see this? This is the same verse in Vayikra, Yud Tes Lamed Aleph. Now, if you recall, we discussed that some of the reasons for these things is, first of all, it's idolatrous, and also it is trying to seek the future, information about the future. And it's also setting up a priestly cult, because only certain people have access to this, whatever the secrets are that enable access to this type of divination. So we're warned not to do that. Gimel, so it appears, according to this, that non-Jews are also, all the children of Noach, which includes all human beings, are also warned on these matters. And the truth is that the Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi in the Talmud Sanhedrin, Daf Nun Vav Amud Al Beis, hold this way, that every single human being is warned that they're not supposed to do these things. That everything that's said in the Torah, this verse of sorcery, all human beings, all Bnei Noach, are warned in these matters. And you're going to start to see that we discussed this last couple of weeks. We were discussing about bringing a person's child to Melech. The question, this was from a verse that included a number of different prohibitions that was learned out that these all apply to every single human being. Why? Because it says, on account of this, the non-Jewish residents of the Holy Land are being sent out of the Holy Land because of these actions. And Rabbi Yossi learns that they wouldn't be punished unless they'd been warned. So it means that every human being was warned about these actions and is not allowed to take them. So this verse says, this so this is a whole list of sorceries and a type of idolatry related activities, and but then he says at the end, but lahalacha, practically we don't learn this way. Now he's going to now discuss, and you're going to see that we've discussed this from many times, many different angles, but every time he is bringing this point up again. Why? Because this is a reference work also, that you should be able to look up any one of these mitzvahs and know what the answer is. And so he's going to tell us again this question of when it says in the Gemara, in the Talmud, that the non-Jews are warned. Rabbi Yossi says they are. And then the conclusion is, well, we don't learn that way. What does it exactly mean that they're warned? And is it only, is the warning, is the debate over whether they are prohibited in it? Or is the debate on whether or not they are, it's a capital crime? So we're going to see that in reality, the bottom line of this discussion is going to sound familiar to you. And we're going to see that they are warned not to do it, but we don't list it in the list of capital crimes. But nearly, And it appears to me that this is referring to the question of whether they are warned, musharin, about these matters in terms of the punishment of the death penalty. She based in that a court of law is going to execute people for this. So this is not the holding of the Tanakama, the first person that's teaching, that the death penalty would extend to these other prohibitions. Only in the Sheva mitzvahs, the 7 central components of the commandments that apply to every single human being. So we know that there's 7 general categories. Okay, but not everything in those 7 general categories is going to be death penalty. Only particular things that are more represented by the title of those 7 general categories. So idolatry has to be literal idolatry. These other things which are connected to idolatry and are idolatry-like practices are, however, not directly idolatry. So therefore, there's no death penalty for them. As I said that already. Shav bilvad. And also within idolatry itself, only matters that a Jewish court of law would execute a Jewish person for. Only those matters can a non-Jew be executed for. Anything that a Jewish court of law would not execute a person over or about is now going to be anything that a Jewish court of law would not execute someone over, a Jewish person over, is a non-Jew is not executable for that either. Im kolzeh, kfar kasav Rambam, and with all this, the Rambam already wrote in the 9th chapter of the Laws of Kings, on the second law, even though, so the Rambam makes it clear, even though they're not executed for it, it's forbidden in all these matters. And if so, it then appears to who adin the Maisa Ayvidani. So it should be the same thing for this actions of related to this sorcery and divinations. All these different types of activities seeking divinations about the future. All these things are completely forbidden to non-Jews. It also appears from the words of our teacher, Menachem Azariah, who is the Ramah Mifano. And the Ramah Mifano, so he writes over there, we brought it before, we go back to earlier classes where he writes about the 30 mitzvahs, lists of 30 mitzvahs. He comes to explain what we learned in the tractate, the Talmud of Talmud tractate Chulin, on the 92nd page on this first side, which was already brought in the beginning of this sefer. See there in the footnote. He lists 30 commandments that apply to non-Jews. And he says that all these 30 are contained within the 7 commandments. That within the prohibition of idolatry is contained or subjugated to it, is secondary to it, but brought within it, within the general category of idolatry, all of these things that we just discussed, all these different types of sorcery. He said the Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi dafke b'Sanhedrin, 56 to side 2, which just means we need to look into this, because for Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi, specifically in Sanhedrin, this is included. They're including it. Tanakama lo svira came, but the one who lists the Sheva Mitzvahs originally doesn't include these. Al kain saig loim the gam Tanakama b'nei Noach also b'kulim. We have to understand that the one who's teaching the Sheva Mitzvahs and limiting it to just idolatry, he's saying also that these other sorceries are forbidden. But based in but based in will not execute a person for these things. It says over here in parentheses, in a square parenthesis, which I think we put in by the editor. So he tried, the person who put the editor, I don't think this is Rabbi Steif, I think it's the editor. He's saying over here that, well, what about pushing back in the other direction? Because the one who teaches us in the Talmud in Chulin, it lists 30 mitzvahs he holds like Rabbi Yossi, and we said that we don't hold like Rabbi Yossi. But again, we only that just brings us back to the same point. We only don't hold like Rabbi Yossi as to his suggestion that all these commandments are forbidden to non-Jews to the extent that it's a capital crime. But we do hold, according to Rabbi Yossi, that they're all forbidden to every single human being. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 13. We're going to see that next week we will continue chapter 14, chapter 15, 16, 17, 18. I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but they're brief because they continue in this vein, discussing the other aspects of sorcery and divinations that we are forbidden to do. Every human being is forbidden to participate in. So that's what we have to make clear over here. The forbiddenness of it, what's really the problem? We said already, the connection to idolatry, trying to figure out the future, which is a violation of the commandment to be simple and with God Almighty, and also setting up a priestly group cult that can answer, knows the answers to these things. Anyone have any questions?
Rabbi, in the land of Israel right now, there's a secular government and secular courts, but there is a din, depending on each traditions. Can they execute death penalty if somebody is found to be doing these divinations or idolatry?
So generally speaking, the death penalty is, from a Jewish court perspective, is only carried out in the times of the Sanhedrin. And we don't have a Sanhedrin right now. Now, that's one point. The second point is that the Sanhedrin, the courts could, in states, in a time of tremendous, like if murder starts to be spread in the land, courts could institute a death penalty in general, just as a principle. Now, they're not actually doing this in the land of Israel. So that's but that could theoretically be done. Now, the non-Jewish courts, that the non-Jews are required as one of the Sheva Mitzvos B'nei Noach to establish, is that they have to carry out these judgments. Now, one of the complexities that comes to be is that who's qualified as a witness. And so if people are, for example, themselves worshiping idolatry, or they're involved in other violations of the Sheva Mitzvos B'nei Noach, or they might be disqualified as a qualified witness, and then it becomes difficult to actually carry that out from a practical perspective. The question is, how do you have justice then? So that's something we're going to discuss at a future time. There's a lot of interesting questions over there, but the bottom line is that we have to look and see that the necessity of carrying out judgment. If you see, for example, that people, because there's no death penalty, then people are becoming more and more lawless and more murderous, then you have to investigate whether or not proper action is to institute a death penalty. So if you have times of general calm and once in a very rare case, someone murders somebody, and but we don't have the Sanhedrin, we don't have maybe all the component pieces put into place properly. So then we could, so to speak, the society will survive without the death penalty. But if it becomes the human life is cheapened, people no longer see that a human being is created in God Almighty's divine image. They're not created in God Almighty's, they're not seeing themselves as created in God Almighty's divine image, and they're starting to eliminate each other's lives. Then you have to say, well, what do we have to, what action do we have to take over here? And it's very interesting that these two go in hand, because the commandment of dinim, which is of judgment, is really a commandment of chinuch, of dedicating people into the service of God Almighty. So the responsibility of the judges is to educate, to bring people into, dedicate people into the service of God Almighty, that they would know that they're created in God Almighty's divine image, and that their fellow is created in God Almighty's divine image. So if you have a strong court system of actively engaged judges, both Jewish judges and non-Jewish judges, who are actively involved in bringing the awareness of the population, each individual person in the population, to the settled certainty that he knows he's creating God Almighty's divine image and his fellow human being is, then you won't even need to come to the death penalty. But when the court is weak and the judges are weak in their influence on the people, then that creates more and more lawlessness, which then puts the judges in a situation where they have no choice but to exercise a death penalty. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all for being here. God bless you all. I will continue next week with the other chapters and continue to make progress. Thank you all for being here.